Dad's night to cook. It is Dad's night to cook. From the pantry he'll take a look from a book to see what we'll dine on tonight. What we gonna cook, Dad? What we gonna eat? His recipe's great, it is a must. When he cooks, he makes believe and trust, and a wonderful meal on the table. Yummy for our tummy. It is Dad's night to cook.
All right, y'all, let's start working on the lobster tail for our surf and turf dinner. Now, let me tell you, if you're gonna work on these lobsters, please don't make my mistake. When I first worked on live lobsters in front of my children, it was a horror show. I brought them live lobsters home thinking the kids wouldn't fall in love with them because they're so ugly little bottom dwellers. They had named the lobsters. They had talked to the lobsters. And then when I had to prep them lobsters, it was a hot, horrid mess. Y'all quit fighting up in there. Number 2 dogs. They get along, but sometimes they just... It was a horrid mess. You dropping the lobster in the hot water, they running, the kids running around. Daddy killed the lobster. Daddy killed Sebastian. I was like, that ain't Sebastian from the Little Mermaid. It's a villain. Ugh. Don't do it. Go and get yourself some lobster tail, okay? Go and get these things, okay? So let's get these up. I'm telling you, spare yourself the horror. Spare yourself. All right, again, spare yourself the horror. So what I did was I went to my fishmonger and I got me some fresh lobster tail. He preps all of the live lobsters and gives you the raw lobsters and preps them for you and stuff like that. So what you want to do is on the flip side, bottom side of the lobster, you can either get a good pair of kitchen shears. And what you can do is you can just cut these little flippers off if you want to make the process a little easier if you want. It doesn't really matter. I do it just for presentation's sake. Okay. So once that part is clipped, what you want to do is you just kind of want to press on these little rib parts of the lobster and just kind of break them. And when you'll hear a little snap when it's done. It just makes the removing of the meat a little easier. So you can hear the little breaking, snapping of the lobster, okay? And so I'm going to show you my process. Get my other pair of kitchen shears. See if this works out better for me. Now you don't want to cut it all the way you want to cut it to the base, but not all the way through. You want to leave it just hanging in there just a little bit, okay? So what you're going to do is you're just going to split the side of the lobster until you can get the meat out. And that's where taking the bottom part of it makes it easier. So you can just flip on the other side, run your hand through it, and loosen up that meat. And just run your finger, and you're going to see this orangey part of it, and that's the part you want to just separate from the shell, like so. And then all we're going to do is we're going to leave the shell together once we lift the meat up. And you're just going to set it back on top of the shell like so. With the seasoning we're going to be using, it makes no difference. So our presentation is going to be like so when we finish cooking it. And that's prepping your lobster. Coating, because we're going to prep the butter that's going to go on top of these lobsters when they cook. Okay, let's prep it. So we're just going to use a few sprinkling of Old Bay seasoning, and I kind of just like do a very light dressing. We just want to prep our lobster to receive this butter season that we're going to be using. You can continue to wear gloves. I wore the gloves because they have like little sharp edges on the side. And again, anytime I use any kind of salt, I'm going to use pepper. Bobby has the pepper already. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a lime. And I'm going to use a lime juice to just kind of citrus it up a little bit. I have 6 tails here, so a half a lime should cover what you need on all 6. what we're going to do on the other side of the lobster, when we do the butter seasoning, we're going to butter both sides and season both sides. Usually people forget to butter the other side, but we'll do that. So our lobster tail is seasoned, prepped to be cooked, to receive the butter, receive it, and then cook. So let's work on our butter seasoning that we're going to need. First starts with melting half a stick of butter. And I'm going to use a quarter teaspoon of the seasoning that I want. So I want me some nice paprika. Just a little healthy coating of that. We want a quarter of paprika, a quarter of pepper. I'm going to do a quarter salt, and this is kosher salt in there. I'm going to do dry basil, but I'm also going to put some fresh oregano on my my lobster after they're cooked, and I'm going to pull that from the garden. So I'm going to use a quarter of dry basil in there. I'm going to give that a quick mix. And what you're going to do is you're going to brush the lobster with this butter seasoning, and then whatever's left over you leave for after it's cooked to brush the remaining on to that. To my butter sauce, I'm also going to add some garlic. I just got some minced garlic, and I'm going to add a half teaspoon of garlic in there, and then some of the juice just to make it really garlicky. So I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to take one of my lobsters and I'm going to coat it. I'm going to start on the underside. A lot of people forget to coat the underside of their lobster. But trust me, this lobster, you need to coat the whole thing. And I'm very generous with my coating. So I'm just going to brush the top like so. Get that meat in there. And there you have it. I'm going to brush the rest of them, and I'm going to bake this at 450 degrees. And with the leftover marinade that I have, I'm going to brush the lobster after they've been cooked. So what we have to do, we're going to prep the seasoning that's going to go on top of our sirloin. So what I went and did from the garden, my home garden, I got some rosemary, I got some fresh parsley, and I got some sage. You can use oregano in this, but I kind of tend to use sage because it's a stronger herb, aromatic, and it helps to sink into the thicker cut of your sirloin, your beef sirloin. So we're going to just prep all of these seasoning, get them all cut up, and then add it to our seasoning mix that we're going to use, our mise en place, all right? And remember, you can use dry seasoning, but I tend to use fresh seasonings when I'm doing these kind of meals. So again, we're going to use this rosemary, and what you do is you hold the tip of the stem of the rosemary, and you run it against the grain of the rosemary until you get all the sprigs that you want off. Voila, your fresh herbs. Just kind of like walking through. So we're gonna start with some garlic. So I'm gonna start with a tablespoon of garlic, fresh minced garlic. Alrighty, so we don't want it to have a garlicky kind of flavor, but we kind of want it to sit in there with some garlic. Now I'm gonna use 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. Now I know it sounds like a lot, but let me tell you, meat loves seasoning. It loves it. It loves to be seasoned. So that's why we're using 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. Now, I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of red pepper flakes or crushed red pepper. just to give it that added pop that we need. I'm going to use a half a tablespoon of cumin. Cumin's a very, very strong flavor, but we're going to just use a half for our recipe. I'm going to use a whole tablespoon of adobo seasoning. It's a very salty season, but it has some of those things that we need in it. I'm going to use a whole teaspoon and a half of fresh good paprika. And I'm going to use a whole teaspoon of ground pepper, because we have salt in there, so we need pepper, okay? And then I'm going to add my fresh herb that we chopped up earlier. Just add that to that. And then we're going to give this a mix. All right, so let's prep our beef sirloin. So now, like I said, if you have a good relationship with your butcher, you can ask them to cut it however you want. So what we're going to do is we want to just pat dry our beef to incorporate our butter. So we're going to let this dry, get this dry, because we want it to hold on to our butter and then our seasoning. So then what we're going to do is we're just going to wrap that back up. So let's get our butter ready for this to get that going. Now, it starts with some melted butter. What I did was I melted the butter in a bowl. And I'm going to add me about a quarter cup of Cabernet Sauvignon. You can use whatever red wine you want. I use Castillo del Diablo. And just going to use about a quarter cup of red wine into my butter dish. And it's a good Cabernet. You might as well use a good wine if you're gonna serve it on to a good piece cut of meat. So you don't want to, start skipping out on that. So I'm just gonna roll that up in there just to coat it. Coat it on all sides. The tip is already gone because, again, this is a very expensive piece of meat, so they tend to save all the pieces of the sirloin. All right, so now your meat is ready to receive the seasoning. You want to leave that leftover butter because you're going to pat it back on. What I want to do is I want to just incorporate my seasoning all over my meat. But meat loves seasoning, loves it. It like says, please season me. It talks to you if you listen. It does. I use all of it. I don't let anything go to waste because I want this to be encrusted, delicious. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it, and within the wrap we're going to put the rest of the butter and the rest of the seasoning on so it can hold its shape. I'm gonna get some saran. I'm gonna lay out. Saran can try to fight you, okay? So you gotta be better than the saran. You gotta fight the thing back, okay? Don't let it beat you. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the saran here, and got my sirloin there. What we're gonna do is butter onto there. It's a lot of butter. And then what I do is after I wrap it, hopefully it holds its shape like so. We're going to wrap it in some aluminum foil. Because this is going to spend overnight into the refrigerator. And before I cook it, I generally like to take it out for about 2 hours on the counter. So it can be 2 hours into room temperature. Longer if you want. It just holds a better sear to be cooked. And I'm going to bake this. So I'm going to bake it at a high temperature, probably like at 450 for about, until I want a medium rare on my sirloin. So my inner is probably going to be 175. core temperature, 145, 175 for my medium rare. All right. Okay, you guys, a nice little side sauce or whatever you want to call it, dressing that goes well with beef tenderloin or steak or whatever is a horseradish sauce. So we're going to make a homemade little horseradish sauce. I'm going to walk you through it in just a second. But you got to be careful because we're going to serve potatoes with this meal. Okay, we're going to have mashed potatoes. A lot of people think it's just like sour cream. It looks like sour cream. The first time I made that mistake, not knowing it was a horseradish sauce, I almost died. My sinuses was cleared up. I mean, I could breathe like, woo, but ooh, it's a strong little thing. So let them know that it's a horseradish sauce and not sour cream or whatever, yogurt, tzatziki, whatever. It's horseradish sauce. So come on, let's make this horseradish sauce. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with 2 teaspoons of sour cream. 2 healthy teaspoons. I'm using this little dish because it's the same one I'm going to have the horseradish served in. Okay, so we're going to put all our white things. We're going to put 2 teaspoons of sour cream, 1 tablespoon of mayonnaise. See how this is looking white like it's supposed to be just sour cream, looking like sour cream? This is exactly the reason you got to warn your people. And then I'm going to use some prepared horseradish. And it all depends on how you like it, how much you like. I like it to be a little horseradish. I want it to be horseradish. So I'm going to use 2 healthy teaspoons of prepared horseradish. Then I'm going to add me half a lemon juice. In there. And then afterwards is when I'm going to add salt and or pepper for flavor. Sometimes this just carries its own flavor and you think, this is enough. But the other ingredients we're going to add is some vinegar.
We're moving on now to the side, to a deluxe apartment in the sky. We're moving on to the side. We finally got a piece of the pie. Fish don't fry in the kitchen. Beans don't burn on the grill. Took that whole lot of trying just to get up that hill. All right, here's the wonderful people here to share this surf and turf meal that I only make once a year, but I had to make it for my girl Jen. Now y'all heard about Kev, but this is Jennifer, who I couldn't like. Y'all, I'm telling you, she is a blessing to me every day at camp. Every day she's a blessing. I'm seriously, I'll tell y'all more stories later, but this is family coming to enjoy this meal. So if we're about to enjoy, we have a blessing around this table. Bless everyone who has come here to enjoy this meal. And we're about to eat, y'all. Surf and turf. Get yourself some.
Thanks, guys, for joining me for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed. Now, remember to like, to share, to comment, to subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you know when new postings have been posted. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Dad's Night to Cook. I hope you enjoy.
From the pantry, he'll take a look my book to see what we'll dine on tonight. What you're gonna cook, Dad? What we're gonna eat? His recipe's great. It is a must. When he cooks, he makes believe and trust, and a wonderful meal on the table. Yummy for a tummy. It is as night to cook.